Business is a long-term sport. And the reason I say that is because you need the mindset. And here's the thing, people always talk about mindset being woo-woo, and even I think that sometimes, right? You hear people, if I need business coaching, I need business coaching. I don't need a therapy session from you, right? And I go through that to this very day where in some cases, I need actual tactics or, hey, here's what you need to do. I need it done. But here's the thing to understand underlying all of that, the mindset needed to go from here, way down here, somewhere years down the line, is right in between your freaking ears. A lot of times we do things in the present for short-term gratification. And I'm not talking about eating a cookie. I'm talking about doing things that burn bridges, doing things that are unethical. I'm in the payment processing space, and I've had the opportunity to build a business from ground zero to doing billions of dollars in sales every single year because of ego, because of greed, because of a lack of self-esteem. My ex-business partner and his friends, they stole millions upon millions of dollars, 8 figures, but that's not why we started the business. We started the business because we literally a good old boy and girl network. We're way different. We have the opportunity to do something bigger, better, and ethical instead of constantly screwing people over, sliding things in the contract. I'm not saying everything in there shouldn't be in there, but sometimes what salespeople do is they verbally say one thing. In some cases, they know that it's total opposite of what actually is going to happen, but they're up under so much pressure to sell, and they're being told, hey, I got this, and so now you need to get this, and I got this big house, this big car, I got all these different things, and here's what you need to do so you can get it. And they don't understand all of the hard work that these people with all these things, all the sacrifices they've made to get those things, but they also don't understand some of the shortcuts that maybe they've made that they haven't paid for yet. When you're in that moment, you do things without understanding the long-term effect of it. I was just talking with a guy today. He's doing all this groundwork to get this client to the next level, right? And this client really needs it. Like really, really, really needs it, because some of us know how to sell, we know how to market, like we know how to do that, but we don't know how to run a business, right? It's a totally different skill set, in my opinion, because it's easy for me to get on camera. I'm not gonna say it's easy for me to talk, because that's not my forte, that's not my specialty, but it's easy for someone to get on camera and talk the game. It's not easy to actually do the work behind the scenes that's required to make all of what people say happen. Sometimes you focus on one area, you're either great at sales and marketing, or you're great at the back end of it, right? The operational side of it. And I had an ex-business partner who had become good. He was just tons of mistakes that were made along the way on the operational side and sales and marketing side, became good at it, good enough to also recognize what they weren't good at to bring other people in, to the point where now they knew how they could take advantage of people like me who trusted but not verified. And so they were like literally in the moment doing things that would benefit them, but not having the mindset to understand like business is a long-term sport, right? You may win a whole bunch of games, but you still got to get to the playoffs, you still have to get to the championship game, and you may even win the championship game that year. But then how about the next year? How about the next year? Like, how long are you gonna be on top, right? And some people figure, oh, you know what, I'll make a whole bunch of money right now, and then I'll be rich, I'll be successful. And all the things that I did before, I've gotten away with. Now, sure, you can go out and hire a super shady attorney. There's tons of super shady attorneys out there. I hate to say that, but there's an unlimited number of super shady attorneys who will take you on as a client as long as you pay them. And there are even more attorneys available to fight that attorney, right? Or to battle on behalf of your dollars, because you have one attorney who says, you know what, I'm just gonna run up a legal bill for the other side. And the attorney who's helping you says, you know what, let's go, right? Because who's winning there? The attorneys. The attorneys are winning. One is just running up legal bills because they can, and unfortunately, that's how the legal game works. And that's one way to fight someone is, hey, I may not be right, but I'm gonna run up your legal bills. And another attorney, like they have to do something. And so maybe there is a way where you can stop that kind of behavior, but some attorneys say, well, we just keep going back and forth. We're still making money, and then eventually money runs out. Or another party says, you know what, why go through this? Let's settle. And unfortunately, that's how a lot of legal cases are resolved. It's not based upon justice. It's not based upon what's right. It's based upon legalese, which is not necessarily lawful, but it's legal. These are all these short-term approaches, and you may even win the legal case. You know, the attorney may win, the attorney may get paid, but I guarantee you that they are paying the price for that. Just, you know, not all money is good money. They may be justifying a means to an end. I'm sure my ex-business partner thought the same thing. I'm sure his attorneys feel the same way. Justice is blind, right? I just know what I know. Even though common sense is there, and if you have, you know, even a third of a brain, it's easy to see, but that's the legal game. And it's not just the attorneys, because we often do it as well, where you have this particular person now who's doing things to undercut the person that's actually helping them out for the long term. In the short run, it may work. They may even win. They may make a few extra dollars, or they may blow the whole thing up, which normally is what happens when people make short-term decisions that have long-term effects. They don't have the mindset, and they're not understanding that the sport of business is a long-term game. And so you may have to, in some cases, you may have to sacrifice and take the L for that particular day, for that particular week, for that particular month, maybe for that year or a couple years. You may have to take the L. I took the L for a ton of years where we weren't making any money. We were dumping all the money back into the business, all the money back into staff, all the money back into the sales reps. And sales reps, they do the same thing. You know, they say, you know what? I'm burning and churning. Let me get as much as I can from this particular client. Let me burn them if I need to, because that is what they see as a means to an end at that particular moment, not understanding that once that client finds out they've been burned, they will never do business with them again. And in some cases, the client never finds out. There is a such thing, there's an ancient principle. We're talking about business and entrepreneurship here, but you just cannot divorce a higher law from business, right? That's just not a principle that I believe in. I believe that it's all intertwined. If you are into any kind of philosophy whatsoever, there's a principle called Ma'at, M-A-A-T, right? And it's from an ancient Egypt, well, not the Egypt of today that's religious and that has any particular religion associated with it. This is an ancient spiritual system. And it's called Ma'at. And one of the symbols of Ma'at are scales. And of course, with scales, you have two sides. On one side of the scale is a feather. And on one side of the scale is a heart. And it's like, what does that freaking mean? It means that your deeds, your actions, those actions should have your heart as light as a feather. It doesn't mean that you're going to make mistakes. I make mistakes probably, I don't know how many mistakes per day. Some I know, some I don't know about. Are the deeds that you do, are they in balance, right? Are they light as a feather? When you're carrying out these deeds, especially in payment processing, there's so many moving parts. There's like merchant statements, there's all kinds of contracts that we sign and we don't read the fine print. And there's all kinds of things that we do as well as business owners in the short term, because we know it's going to make us money today. We say we just need to get past today. But we often cut corners. Cutting corners meaning that, you say, I'm going to ignore my ethics. I'm going to ignore what is right because I want to make this money. Not understanding that these particular deeds that we're doing, they have a cumulative effect. I remember reading a book called The Slight Edge by, I think his name was Jeff Olson. And in that book, he spoke about the slight edge is basically doing something enough to the point where you have like this big snowball effect. Just like if you've seen the animation where you have a little bitty snowball, right? And then it's going downhill. And then as it goes downhill, the further and further it goes, it picks up more momentum. And then the snowball gets even bigger and bigger. And to the point where now it's like unstoppable. And we'll initially start off like really, really small. And that's how our actions are in business, where you have so many actions and it becomes this huge effect. And then we often wonder, like, even myself sometimes, like, man, why did this happen? Is it a lesson for me? Or was I doing something like being blind, not doing my due diligence, not doing enough homework, trusting too many clients, because clients aren't always right. And we try to give people the benefit of the doubt. And what ends up happening is that these people are super short-term in their thinking. They're thinking about right now. But it ends up causing you a freaking headache just for working with them. And those actions that they make, it absolutely affects them, but it also affects you. And so you think about the sales reps, they're often taught to sell, and that's it. I haven't heard of any class on ethics in any sales groups, and there's tons of sales gurus on the internet. I never hear them talk about ethics, you know? I'm not knocking it, but I never hear them talk about ethics. And I do know that there are some groups that do practice, you know, somewhat decent ethics, but I haven't met many, right? To be honest with you. And when you're working with these sales reps, if you can instill in them the sport of business as being a long-term game, it will have a huge benefit, more than just sales skills, more than just, you know, tactics and strategies and all this other kind of stuff. Because often what these sales reps do, because of that little snowball, they start off, let's say, the first year where they're new and they learn some tactics. Then they learn more tactics. And then by, let's say, the third year, they're like pretty savvy and they're like, you know what? I know some things. And then they start to abuse that power and manipulate in order to sell. And now you're talking about 5 years or even 10 years, or people who are older, who are so rigid, it's like a baby is pliable and flexible, right? Whereas sometimes people who are much older, this is why they say you can't teach an old dog new tricks, because they become really rigid and stuck in their ways, like hard, right? Very inflexible. And you have to deal with that when you have sales reps, especially in the payment processing space, where all they know is game. And I don't mean game from a perspective of the sport of business being a game. Game me like I'm gaming you, like running plays, so to speak. And it's a lot of short-term actions that have long-term effects that you have to deal with. And one of the things that I really know it's missing in payment processing is having that mindset to understand that business is a long-term sport. There are rules in the sport. Now, sometimes the rules are broken. If you're out in the street playing basketball and you freaking elbow somebody in the head, the rules could be maybe nothing happens, you knock the guy out. Maybe the rule is somebody else beats you down, or in some cases, maybe you get shot, unfortunately. If you're in a league that's monitored, like the NBA, you go and elbow somebody, you're gonna get put out the game, you're gonna have fines, like that behavior just can't continue because it's not allowed. But there are consequences for that. In the short term, and this is why in the league like that, they correct it immediately as soon as they possibly can. You get hit with the fine, you get suspended, right? But before that, you know, the refs, they give you texts, they give you fouls, like it's a big deal because they're looking at the game of basketball, not just at that moment, not just that game, not even just the next game, but the game of basketball as a long-term sport. What do they want the NBA to be represented as? Is it a sport like rugby where you just go and tackle people, or like the WWF or MMA where you just go and elbow and punch people and box people? No, they don't want it to be known for that. They want it to be known as a sport of talents, of skills, of competition, of physical prowess, of physical ability, but in the spirit of excellence, in the spirit of competition in that particular sport, not with malice, not to, you know, tackle somebody while they're in the air, or, you know, to kick them in the groin or whatever, you know what I mean? Or choke them to death. That's not what they want the game to be known as. And so you have to think about this in the sport of business, in the sport of entrepreneurship, in the sport of customer service, in the sport of technical support, in the sport of risk, in the sport of underwriting, in the sport of sales, in the sport of operations, in the sport of you as the business owner, right? What do you want your sport to be known as over the long term, not in a week, not 2 weeks, not just 6 months? And sure, you can make a lot of money in a short period of time. Absolutely, and who wouldn't want to do that? But at what price? There is a price for everything that you and I do. I'm paying the price for a lack of insight, blind spots, right? I'm not blaming myself per se, but I have to take responsibility for it. But there's a lesson in there for me as well. And is my heart as light as a feather? And here's the thing, with these laws that are outside of man's law, which basically is based upon money, there's the law of your conscience. Like, what does your conscience tell you? Some people can sleep well at night, but then again, everybody has to answer to something. Even the toughest warrior, even the toughest person, you know, the most successful business person, the most successful company, we don't see what happens behind the scenes, right? We only see the outward appearance. We only see the success that people show you. We don't know what kind of demons they're dealing with. We don't know what kinds of issues that they have. This is why I think understanding the sport of business as a long-term game is so important. And it doesn't necessarily have to do with the tactics, the day-to-day tactics of the business. It's really having that mindset. In everything that we do, we need to have this mindset. I'm not saying that short-term tactics aren't important, they are, but are those tactics leading to your end goal? Is your end goal just to be rich at any price? Or is your end goal to be wealthy with a healthy family, with a great lifestyle, with people who you've done business with that you can talk to and communicate with? And even if they don't understand, you know in your heart of hearts that you've done the right thing. I don't mean done the right thing just by you, but done the right thing that benefits all parties. I deal with financial institutions as well, and I've had people tell me, hey man, I'm a better business person than you. And I'm like, okay. And I didn't understand that at the time, but then after a while, I was like, oh, okay, they got me. Yep, you got me. Great, you're a better business person than me today because you took advantage of me. And that's my fault, and I had to learn that lesson. And here's the thing, you can't take it personal. It's a sport, right? And just like when guys are playing basketball, you know, they know each other. Then when they get on the court, some guys who are not even being paid for it, they go crazy and be like, man, when we're playing, I don't know you. I don't need that. But you get the point. When something like that happens and an infraction like that happens against you, you can't take it personal because then you end up reacting with a short-term approach that's gonna have this long-term effect. And so I know it's gonna sound crazy, but one infraction against another doesn't make it right. I'm not saying you need to be like Jesus and turn the other cheek either, but look at business as a long-term sport. And I think that would help us get through some of the challenges, the ebbs, and, you know, the highs and the lows that we go through in business, where sometimes we're like, shoot, man, how am I gonna pay my bills? I can't make any money. And you're like, you know what, I'm just gonna do this, forget it. I don't care what happens. There's a price to pay for that. And it's extremely important to have the mindset to understand that. If you like this, hit the like button, obviously. If you have something to share that you think will benefit, share it, put it in the comments. And if you want more of this, subscribe. This is Khaazra. I'm out. Be good.